Vision? What do you know about my vision? My vision would turn your world upside down, tear asunder your illusions, and send the sanctuary of your own ignorance crashing down around you. Now ask yourself, are you really ready to see that vision?
What's up, y'all? This is your boy Tico, Tren, and this is going to be part 2 to the Q&A to Date-Cations. This will be the last time I'll be doing this on this channel, so it'll be transferred over to my other channel. So if you want to hear anything about like Date-Cations and stuff like that, you're going to have to check it out on my other channel. That's typically how it's going to work. I'm basically waiting for the person who asked all the questions so we can get this started for all intents and purposes, and I'm going to play my other intro while I'm waiting for that person to show up so I can answer any and all questions that this person has. Nope, wrong one. Overflow. Okay, there we go. Let's see what we got going on. This basically is about this is basically I'm waiting for the person that wanted to ask me questions. He says started at 12 o'clock his time, 12 noon his time, so I can actually answer any questions that he actually has. So this is part 2 of the Q&A for Date-Cations. So I'm just waiting for people to show up and the guy to show up basically so I can answer his questions better, because I don't know what his questions are this time around because he didn't ask me an email. So that would have been much easier if he'd asked me an email. That would have made this a lot better, a lot more easier to do this basically, so I can actually start on answering a lot of these questions and, move through this very quickly and, efficiently for all intents and purposes. But he didn't, so now I gotta wait for him, and we gotta wait for him to show up to ask all these lovely questions. If anybody watching has any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section below while we're killing time here, because I really don't have anything left to say on this topic but to answer questions. This is why it's basically Q&A instead of telling anybody anything, because I can't think of anything else that I could possibly would have to answer in this process. So if anybody has any questions about Date-Cations and traveling to basically get some pussy, let me know. This is not for dating. This is basically for getting pussy and stuff like that. So if you have any questions, just put it in the comment section below. Like I said, I'm waiting for the person who asked me these lovely things so I can actually answer all his questions. Like I said, I've already did this series, so I really don't have anything really left to talk about on this series. So I'm basically just waiting around for the person to show up. If he doesn't show up, then I'm just going to scrap the stream and say forget about it, because there's no point in beating a dead horse at some point for all intents and purposes. So now I'm just waiting for the guy to show up so we can talk about this lovely thing. It's basically a subscriber request stream. So I'm doing this for that very subscriber. Hell, if people on Facebook even have questions, feel free to ask away. Twitch, same damn thing. Feel free to ask away. What's up, Joe Montana? There you go, man of the hour that I'm waiting for. Feel free to ask away any questions you have. Waiting for him there. Alrighty then. If anybody on Facebook who's watching this on Facebook or Twitch have any questions about this lovely stream, feel free to ask questions about traveling and dating and just sex, basically. Just like there are medical vacations, there are also Date-Cations, basically, too. So feel free to ask based on who you are, or your race or gender, or race or gender. Basically, it doesn't really matter. Feel free to ask, and I'll answer your questions to the best of my abilities. If I can't always have a female friend who actually travels a lot that can answer your questions, I'll be happy to do a show with her to upload these questions that you would have. Can I change the background to maps? I would have to upload a map to do that, but I will on the fly. We'll go with this one right here. We're going to add that to the screen and share the screen with this one. Tab, tab, tab. Amazon. There we go. Sharing it with a map. Better yet, we'll use this one. So I can actually point at shit on this one. We'll use this one because I can point at stuff better on this one. All right, let's see. No, I don't. Um, only person, he's not a gigolo though. The only person I can think of that travels the world and dates around the world that would be remotely close to that would be one master teacher. Um, I can't really introduce you because he's always busy because he does a lot of financial stuff. But if you actually check out his channel, you can actually see any and everything you can see pretty much any and everywhere he goes, and he basically gives you a rundown country by country and stuff like that. He basically sticks to one topic on one country basically on why it's good, why he likes it, and stuff along the lines of that. If you have any questions for him, you could leave him a message under one of his videos, and I think his email is under his videos as well. But he mainly just gives financial advice on top of that. And somebody apparently liked me on Facebook. Yes, Facebook. I got love from somebody on Facebook. Lovely. Thank you, lady. Um, but this is basically Date-Cation. So I can't really name any countries where they have rich women because that's like saying name a country with name a country with rich black people. So that would not be a proper question for me to actually be able to answer for that reason, because at the end of the day it's one of those things where it's like it's not about too much. HD map, there we go, that's better map. I can actually click on it and show there's not very much going on away in that. So as far as rich women, that's one of them things you have to take your chance with. um Typically typically, they typically date the pool boy or the gardener, or people along the lines of that. If you're going to find somebody, or the personal trainer is another good example of stuff like that. So that's been my personal experience. Where if I was with a rich woman, I was a personal trainer, or like I was never a gardener, but like I was the personal trainer, or some type of job like that, where like you basically go in her house and basically show her something or do something for her. Basically, it's typically who rich women tend to, because a lot of times rich women tend to mess around out of convenience. Is what I've noticed. And if you can actually if they can actually stick you in a category. And the sad part about that, I was never really a personal trainer, but that's what I was told. That's how I was introduced to her husband as her personal trainer. But as far as that's concerned, it's not really one of those things where you can. It's not one of those things where you can actually pin down or say this is for sure for that thing. Let's see. Um, I'm not a kiss and tell kind of person, but I will give you hints. If you actually go back and look at some of the videos that I've uploaded on my channel, you would actually get a clear view on the women that I've actually dated and the women that actually send me photos who actually want, or who want to be like, their photos up on my page. Typically the thumbnails alone themselves are typical women who either a or wanted to date or just want my attention to basically show their photos on my as thumbnails from my Spanish channel. Um, what do I do? I actually work for the family business. It's typically what I do. So what I actually do is work for the family business, and I travel quite around quite a lot. A lot other times I'm doing speaking engagements, so that helps me travel around quite often as well too. Um, I wouldn't call myself as popular as like a Jordan Peterson or anything like that, or a Ben Shapiro, but I do get around the world quite often, just doing speaking engagements or being a person that needs to be on a panel, stuff along the lines of that. It's never anything like high profile or anything like that. It typically ends up being low profile because people really don't expect me to be there to actually give advice on different things or talk about various different topics based on my skin. So it kind of sort of shocks people when I do, or I'm kind of like the opener for all intents purposes. Um, as far as like traveling, how often do I travel? I probably travel more often than I actually let on. I typically don't tell people how often I travel, but I travel a lot more often than I'll actually let on me traveling. Half the time I'd be in another country just on GP just because. Um, so I would say, so I won't give away my travel schedule. I would say I probably travel generally anywhere between three to 7 times a week. I travel. Um, to be quite honest, I'm always going places and other places and stuff along the lines of that. I already answered that question in the last video, so um, I don't really like rehashing same topics over and over again. But I did answer that question in the same video, that last video that I actually did and uploaded. Um, so I would say definitely go back and look at that video because I don't really want to have to rehash the same content over and over again. So I typically don't really regurgitate a lot of information based on that, so I can keep the videos different into themselves and have them have their own personality and ideas and things, and for all intents and purposes. Um, what race? I would say white people. White people actually matter more. White men are more popular. Um, White men are more popular. To be honest with you, all around the world, white men are just more popular. It is what it is because typically it comes from the whole entire colonization thing, where typically everybody thinks white is right for all intents and purposes. So at the end of the day, and I actually showed a video about the doll test. So typically, it's all about how everybody views other races versus their own race for all intents and purposes. So it usually people tend to favor white people more. Um, you're fine. I said you were fine. I pretty much answered that question in the last video too. You shouldn't have any problems with getting women. From my overall view of you from the email photos that you emailed me. So you shouldn't have a problem with it. Plus, I've seen some of the video photos that you were in where you were with some pretty attractive women. So I don't see you having a problem with actually getting women. That doesn't you don't strike me as the type of person that would be a creep or anything like that. So you shouldn't even have any problems with getting women. It's just what it is. You shouldn't have any problems at all. As far as that's concerned. Typically white men are more popular when it comes to like traveling. So, but Asian men are popular in the countries that I've told you about for all intents and purposes, and black men are popular in some of those other countries as well too. Because the reason why black people are popular in various countries because black is a taboo. Believe it or not, black is just taboo. It's taboo as fuck. So it's one of those things where it's like it's a curiosity or the wondering. Because typically, when I've actually had white women that actually approach me, despite the fact that I've never dated or had sex with white women, typically what happens with those is it ends up being one of those things where, it's something that they want to try or something that they want to do, or it's a curiosity for them, or it's something that they just want, or something that they just have this just want to try or want to try one time in their life for all intents and purposes is what I've actually found when it comes to a lot of white women. Now white women that date black men on a regular basis, it's just one of those things that's like they just like it or it's just fetish for them or they just want to make their family jealous or they just want to do various things to kind of sort of agitate the one racist person or the couple racist people in their family when it comes to race and looks as far as looks really kind of sort of get swept under the rug by the fact that you're traveling and you're from a first world country. So typically a lot of women are drawn to men from a first world country and or the American accent is a good example of that. So a lot of women in like your UKs, your Great Britains, your places like that, your Asias, your Chinas, your places like that, they typically are drawn towards people who have the American accent or the American sound to them for all intents and purposes. Whereas American women are drawn towards women that have an accent. This is typically why I don't really use my actual accent or base accent around women in America. And I typically just go with my neutral accent. Because what I notice, it draws more attention and it draws unnecessary or unwanted attention from a lot of women. So I typically stick to my neutral accent that I picked up. I would say I picked it up in college. So I typically stick to my neutral accent that I picked up in college, and this is the one that you're hearing now. Um, when I need to go back to I typically only go back to my actual accents, let it be the English and or Spanish one, when I'm around family members and people like that. For all intents and purposes, I would say close family, friends, and family members is typically where I use my actual accent at because I typically try to dodge using my accent on purpose because I don't want the unwanted attention, nor do I want to be somebody's, center of attention based on, my accent for all intents and purposes. And you're fine. You're fine for travel as far as being an Asian guy because I actually seen your pictures, so you're fine. Plus, I've seen the pictures of the women that you're in pictures with hugged up on, so you're fine as far as that's concerned. Or the Netherlands and Denmark likes Asian men. Yeah, they typically do. Um, yeah, they typically do, and I've actually named those countries in the last video, um, as well. As far as places like that, it comes down to the smart factor because typically Asians are known to be very highly intelligent, or because of like how the world is painted. Asians typically are smart, so typically a lot of women typically date smart men so they can actually have because they have the looks themselves. So they want to package the look with the brains basically into their children. So typically, a lot of women would date Asian men based on the fact that they can get an Asian baby out of them, Asian baby out of them with the Asian genetics, basically for being highly intelligent. And they got the looks themselves, so typically they can pretty much wrap the looks up in a final package with the Asian intellect for all intents and purposes. So typically, a lot of Asian men are sought after for just their intellect or just to have a baby so that woman can actually have a smart baby or have a chance of having a very intellectually sound or intellectually intelligent baby for all intents and purposes. Um, typically, typically women date them for this reason. But no, they're typically not hard to pick up. They're typically it's typically a normal pace. It's one of those things where it's like it's all about what you're actually going there for. Because typically with women like that, they typically like with men that they're actually going to be in a relationship with, or going to have some type of relationship with them. So it's one of those things where it's like if you're going to run into that problem, if you're going to try to run into that situation, you're going to have to find somebody who's actually just wants to have fun versus actually being a long-term relationship when it comes out to it. Because typically a lot of these women, they're not there really for fun. If you're going to be dating them, it's not really for fun. For that reason, they're basically trying to settle down and actually have babies. Don't get me wrong, there are women that just want to have sex with an Asian guy just for babies, yeah. But then you also got to run into the ongoing problem of are you going to are you going to have to pay child support for a child in another country? That's the problem that you're actually going to run into with a lot of these women. A lot of these women are looking for actual relationships, and not too many are actually looking to be picked up and dumped off for all intents and purposes. So when it comes down to it, it's all about what your reasoning for going to that country is. Are you going to have sex? Are you going to basically, you know, find a relationship for all intents and purposes? And typically, when it comes down to it, the outcome changes based on what your reasoning for going to those countries are. If you're going for sex, you might find it a bit harder to actually go in for sex. If you go in for relationships, you might find it a lot more easier to go in for a relationship of sorts. Now, don't get me wrong, there are people who travel the world and have women in different countries that are like there and will drop everything for them when they arrive in that country. But it's all about how often you can actually get to that country. If you're only going to be going to that country a one-off time, then it's one of those things where it's like it's probably not going to work out in your favor for all intents and purposes. Um, so typically, it ends up being one of those things where like you can get yourself into trouble a lot of times, or you can actually run into barriers or you know what's the word I'm looking for? Not not ethnic, moral, moral stone walls or moral boundaries or moral stone walls basically that or barriers basically that can actually keep you from actually doing so. So typically you don't want you it all depends on why you're going to that very country because I actually said that in the last video as well too that it depends on why you're going to that country where it can make it easier for you or it can make it harder for you for various reasons based on your actual intentions because typically a lot of women look at your intentions on why you're here or what you're doing before they actually let you go. Good example of that because people always talk about Colombia and how easy it is to actually get women in Colombia. The sad part about that is it's easy to get loose women in Colombia. It's not easy to get women that you are trying to actually, decent women who you're actually trying to make your girlfriend, travel girlfriend, basically when you touch down. Because typically you have to do more work in Colombia. Basically, what happens with that is you basically have to learn the language. If you learn the language, you have a better chance of actually meeting more women. Then on top of that, that opens the door for you to meet more women. It doesn't quite open the door for you to meet the women that you actually want or you're trying to get to, but what it does is actually open the door for you to meet a lot more women. Typically, the women that you're going to actually mess with are going to be women who you both know the language and you have a place to stay, or you have a place to stay in there. That way, they can actually associate you with actual address in Colombia for them to say, okay, yeah, I'm willing to hook up with this man, or roll with this man for this reason, because he has a place. So he's invested in Colombia. Basically, is typically how it looks. The same thing goes for other countries. You have to be invested in those countries for it to be one of those things where it's like, let it be you come regularly, or let it be you come and have a place there. So you can't typically go to any of these countries and find like the women that you're really really attracted to without that very ethnic wall or barrier for all intents purposes. So it's one of those things where it's like, what are your intentions? Why are you coming? What is it that you want out of this country? And if you can't answer that question, you'll typically run into a lot of moral walls, or lot of not ethnic. What's the word I'm looking for? Oh shoot, I can't remember the word I'm actually looking for, but I'm just going to run with it. You're going to run into a lot of moral barriers, basically, or barriers based on who you are and why you're trying to do it. The funnest country I've been, I can't really say the funnest country I've been, for the fact that it varies person to person. Um, Not all people would have the same experience as me, and not all people would actually be able to get around and have as much fun as me in those countries. Typically, because like I'm going to say, if um typically when it comes down to it, it's one of those things where it's like how much of the language you actually know, how much you're actually what you're willing to actually do, and all these other stuff that you're in for and up to for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things where like you basically got to be able to do what you want, um, be able to do what you need to do for all intents and purposes. Um, so it's all about what do you want out of that country, or how much you want to get out of that country for all intents and purposes. Is pretty much the best way I could actually describe it to you. Um, yeah, as far as that, because typically I have a lot of Asian friends. That's basically how I know, because when I travel with a couple Asian friends, and I travel with a white friend, I travel with another Latino, I travel with a black friend, and I travel with a lot of other black people. So typically, my traveling, my traveling, my traveling group, or my traveling entourage, typically are various people of different races and ethnic backgrounds for all intents purposes. So it's one of those things where it's like, if I know my Asian friend could do it, or I know my Indian friend could do it, it's typically one of those things where it's like, you'll be okay, um, based on what you're there for. But it's one of those things where it's like, when you travel, you gotta be open to like various things and different things and foods, and trying various things also as well. So you can't be one of them people that are like, you gotta be, the more open you are when you travel to trying new things, the better off you'll be in those countries. That's the best way I can actually describe that to you. So if you're one of those people that like trying out new things, or trying out new interesting taking doing new and interesting things in those countries, you'll typically make out a lot better, as far as that's concerned. One of the things that you'll learn very quickly is, like I said, the more open you are, the better your opportunities are for meeting and dating various people. Um, I really don't have a favorite country to travel to be honest with you, because typically I like them all about the same. I typically never really have a favorite country. Um, I will say, as far as my Asian friends are concerned, Netherlands, Colombia, Russia, Belarus, Denmark, um, other Asian countries, stuff along the lines of that, Muslim countries, places like that are typically their favorites to travel to. Um, to be honest with you, is the best places you can actually try and actually go to if you really want to know stuff like that. Yeah, the ones that I've named, a lot of the what they refer to as the a lot of those countries up there up top, basically the northern European countries, from Iceland, from Iceland all the way down to like Sweden, are typically nice places to go check out. Um, Russia, Belarus, Albania, Ukraine are also other places that you should definitely check out. Um, because there's niche markets in those ones as well too. Um, let's see. Um, it all depends because it all depends on your approach to things. Because typically, a lot of people fuck up on their approach. A lot of people fuck up on how they portray themselves or their actual image or how they actually look. This is where typically a lot of men fuck up. It doesn't matter how good you look. If you look a hot mess when you show up, you're going to get the same treatment. It don't matter how good you look. It don't matter what it is. Only thing that actually affects stuff is if you're good looking and you're actually in the middle of a conversation, you say stupid shit. That's the only time that it will actually vary for you. You can't be an average looking person and say stupid shit for all intents purposes, and for it to actually go anywhere for all intents purposes. Whereas you could be an attractive person and you can say stupid shit for it to work. However, I can say this: if you're a man who actually commits and own it, and don't give a fuck what anybody's saying, you got a lot of confidence behind you. You typically get away with a lot more shit than everybody else because you're not willing to back down and you really don't care what other people think of you in the process of doing so. So typically, if you're somebody like me, you'll get away with a lot more shit ethnically, morally, and for things like that. More so than a good looking person. Because good looking people can only get away with so much before, somebody's father or mother say some stupid shit, basically. And, then it doesn't really pan out. This has nothing to do with the actual thing, but Rainbow. As far as Rainbow is concerned, my kill death ratio is about like kills usually are like on my worst day. My kills are usually what like 13 to 1, 13 to 3 for kill death ratio on my worst off days, basically. If we're talking Rainbow, if we're talking COD, typically I'm about like kill to death ratios typically runs anywhere between um 16 and 4 for COD. To answer your question, which really made no damn sense, but this is not this is not where this is not what we're actually talking about. Um, yeah, I basically answered that question in the last video as well too. Um, I answered that question in the last video as well too. Yes, it pretty much is. It is. Just don't be a just don't just don't just don't be a hot mess when you do it for all intents and purposes. Don't be a hot mess when you do it. Don't look a hot mess when you do it. Don't be out there looking like who did it, what did it, who ain't gonna do it no more when you actually make these approaches for all intents purposes. So try to avoid doing stupid shit like that. Because a lot of times what a lot of people fail to do or fail to realize is when they typically do stupid shit like that, they typically fuck up their chances of actually, meeting people or meeting nice people for this very reason. So a lot of times people actually get in the way of themselves when they want to meet people. It is what it is. It happens quite often. I mean, so like you can't be shocked by it when it happens. I named all those countries again. These are the same questions you're asking over again, over and over again. Um, so I've already named all those questions in the last. I already named all those countries in the last video for partying and having fun and hooking up. I already named those countries. Yeah, I said that it was already when I answered that question about all the northern European countries typically will go from that from Iceland on down to Sweden basically. It's pretty much there. That you just got to travel and have fun basically. You basically got to travel, have fun, and be able to you know enjoy the nightlife for all intents and purposes, or be willing to actually pay a little bit some money for like the nightlife, because typically a lot of times it's not cheap for the nightlife. So you got to be able to enjoy the nightlife in or the bar scene for this very reason. So typically, you're going to run into like only thing that'll stop you will be cost for a lot of this stuff to have fun and party. Um, you can't really get, and the sad part about that, how that your openness, how open you are will typically get you into private parties based on how open you are. So if you're not an open person, you're not willing to try new things, you'll typically be a boring person, so you won't be able to actually enjoy the country to its fullest if you're just a boring person who basically just want to do various things and won't do various things besides what you're comfortable with. What's up, Corey Steele? What's up, Baron Yam? That's for both countries. You'll date pretty much the same. I mean, you'll rate the same for poor countries and countries, first world countries basically. Like I said, all those Scandinavian countries, I think that's what they refer to them. Scandinavian countries, like I just said, you'll pretty much rate about the same, and you'll rate a little bit higher in the poorer countries for all intents and purposes, or the countries where where there's other Asian ethnic groups at, you'll rate pretty high in those countries as well too. You'll rate pretty high in like Central and South America. You'll rate decently in like the Scandinavian countries for all intents and purposes. You'll rate pretty nice in those countries as well. Same questions over again. Um, Typically, a lot of women in these countries speak English. I said that before. A lot of women in these countries speak English, so you never have to really worry about that. Now, there are women that can't speak English, but you can always find a translator to pretty much help you out with that. I wouldn't trust anybody, but typically you can always find a translator that will help you out with stuff. It don't matter what country you go to. Trust me, somebody speaks English. The problem is though, if you actually learn enough of the language, you have a better selection in women by learning more languages for all intents and purposes, or learning enough so you can actually get around those countries. So basically, you want to be able to learn if you're going to be trying to crack open more opportunities. You basically want to learn the language or seem like you're proactively trying to learn the language to do so. Yeah, basically partying is a skill like any other. But when you get to other countries, because you're brand new there, you won't always be invited to various parties for all intents and purposes. So, like I said, you got to be open and willing to be open to various things and learning new things and learning things about yourself to actually be able to open yourself up to partying and various things. It's typically how it works. So you can't just be going in there with a closed mind. You got to be able to have an open mind to do so. You can't be like some goofy American, like as most people would say. You got to actually be able to have an open mind, and you can't be like some narrow-minded American when you go into these various things. So if you're a narrow-minded American, you'll typically run into a lot more problems. If you're an open-minded American, you'll basically get more out of your trip than you can possibly get. You can't be a narrow-minded American and actually go to various places and wonder and hope that you can actually get things. If you're narrow-minded, that typically comes off as disrespectful in a lot of these countries. No matter your race, creed, or how bad or how good you look, you'll come off as disrespectful, and you'll typically wipe out your chances of actually meeting a new person. So you can't be narrow-minded when you get to these countries. You got to be open-minded. Let's see. Typically, all bars and clubs, women outnumber men in. It doesn't matter what country you're from, what country you're in. For the most part, women outnumber men in bars, all bars in or clubs for all intents and purposes, unless it's something like a rinky-dink dive bar. Typically, women outnumber the men in clubs and bars. Typically, all the bars and clubs I've ever been to, women always outnumber men for all intents and purposes. So it all depends on the night you go. It all depends on what's going on that night, or if it's ladies' night, stuff like that. Or if it's a popular bar, typically women outnumber the men. Or it depends on what night you go. Period, where women were pretty much outnumbered the men. I've already answered that question. Um, oh, trust me, there's a lot of people that speak English in those various countries. They speak English in Russia more than you think. That's not even a thing. They speak English in Russia more than you think. A lot of Russian women know how to speak English, so that's not even a thing. That's just some bull crap you were told. As far as Brazil, Brazil on the other hand, you will run into various problems in Brazil, but typically a lot of Brazilian women can actually speak English, especially the ones that you just want to hook up with. They speak English. Um, if you just want to hook up and that's all you're there for, they speak English. If you're trying to actually, find something meaningful, you're going to want to learn Brazilian. God. I pretty much named all the Caribbean countries in the last video, but typically, yeah, you can actually do what you need to do in the Caribbean countries. Let it be Belize. I'm not Caribbean, not Belize. I mean Caribbean countries. Like your Jamaicas, your Jamaicas, your Hades, your I wouldn't really go to Dominican Republic right now, but I will wait till it like settles down. But Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba. I've already named all these countries before. I don't even know why I'm renaming them again. But typically, yeah, all those countries in the Bahamas and the Caribbeans should be fine for you to actually travel to. I can't think of a country where it's not fine for you to travel unless it's for your safety. As far as like dating and hooking up, I can't think of a country in the Caribbeans and Bahamas where it's not good enough for you to travel unless it's for your safety. Um, let's see. Um, it depends on how you look at it. Typically, my problem in America is typically women that I don't date or find attractive always approach me. Women typically the groups of women that I have a problem with actually are the ones that I don't date. The ones that I don't date or want to get romantically involved with, they typically approach me more. Um, Even though I'm not sexually attracted to them, they typically approach me a lot more than any other group of women. But yeah, the market is a lot harder for the fact that we got Sims. However, despite the fact that we hate on Sims, we actually do need Sims. Sadly, um, sadly, we actually do need Sims. Um, so yeah, it's one of those things where you'll run into that problem as far as that's concerned. And typically, you really can't compare it to other countries for various reasons. For the fact that not all countries are created equal, just like not all men are created equal, not all races are created equal, not everything's created equal in general. So it's one of those things where it's like there's no way you can actually compare it unless you travel outside the country. Like I've always been told, like a good example of that bullshit is I've always been told that European countries are racist, or I've always been told that Asian countries are racist and stupid shit like that, and Latin America is racist. typically, if you travel outside the country yourself, you typically find out very quickly that a lot of times the country who's telling you that these countries are racist are 9 times out of 10 more racist than these countries. It's pretty much how it works. It's all about painting another country in an image so you don't travel outside the country or you don't want to travel outside the country for this very reason. Typically, your country wants you to stay as long as humanly possible and never wants you to leave. It is what it is. So your country never wants you to leave that country. So your country paints propaganda to basically paint another country or a bunch of other countries in a bad light for all intents and purposes. Typically, another good example of that is how first world countries view other first world countries. Even though they're first world countries and they're allies, typically your country would paint that other country in a bad light and say, you might not want to go there for this reason, this reason, this reason. Why? Because they don't want you to spend much money there, or basically they want you basically to view that country the way they want you to view that country because it's based on propaganda. It is what it is. So it's one of those things where like if you don't travel outside your country, you would never know. You always believe that that country's racist and or hates people, or they kill people and they're dangerous for this very reason. Typically, the countries that are the most dangerous are the countries that typically dumbass people travel to on a regular basis, but they never stop traveling to, all because that would be your Greece's. I would say your most dangerous countries at this point in time would be Greece and Dominican Republic, or the most dangerous countries to travel to if you actually really had to travel to those countries. Those are the most dangerous countries to travel to, Greece and Dominican Republic in the whole entire world. Is pretty much the best way I can put it, along with various other African countries as well too. I don't really feel like naming them because there's a decent amount of them. I'll just name them in an offshoot video for that reason. Even though I got the map up, I'm really not trying to go through that right now. Like I said, typically a lot of the women outside America like the American accent. So it's one of those things. It's one of those things where it's one of those things where you'll run into various things, and it's one of those things where like you'll run into various things based on your experience and how well you're how open you are in other countries. Typically, I'm a very closed person, so I typically don't really talk to a lot of people. So typically for me, you would think I would have a problem with actually getting women in another country for this reason because typically I'm an introvert and I typically keep to myself and I typically don't really talk to people unless I'm lost or I don't talk to people unless I have to, like it's a bank or if it's for directions or if it's like a restaurant or things along the lines of that for all intents and purposes. So I typically keep to myself when I travel to other countries. Do I have a problem with getting women in those countries? No, I don't. Um, so it's often one of those things where it's like they like the accent, and because I have this neutral accent right here, it helps me actually. It helps me a lot more because it's American accent or American African American accent. So it helps me a lot more get what I want when I travel to various countries. So I never really have a problem. Now I will say this: when I travel to other countries and I use my base English accent, I don't have any problem with getting women either. When I use my Latin accent that I typically very rarely use unless I'm speaking Spanish or talking to family members or when I'm pronouncing something in Spanish or saying something that's Spanish for all intents and purposes or pronouncing a name, you typically hear that too. It all depends on what I'm actually trying to do or try to get out of that country for all intents and purposes. It's typically how it works. So my accent varies based on what I'm there for and why I'm there. Is typically how it is. Or if I speak the language in that country, my accent will alter also. So if I speak the language in that country, my accent also alters based on the country and dialect and or language I'm speaking. So typically, this is my English speaking accent, and it's not the most recognizable, and it sounds different online than it does in person, but it's done like that on purpose. So when you meet me in person, I typically sound different than what I do online. Um, but typically people can say I sound different. I sound different, but it's one of those things where it's like it is what it is for all intents and purposes. So traveling and dating, life will be different in other countries for the fact that if you have an American accent, you'll be fine. It's if you have this American swag about you, basically, you'll be fine. It is what it is. Yeah, there's a big difference. Um, if you date somebody in another country, it's typically one of those things where it's like, is it for convenience? Is it permanent? Or y'all going to maintain friendships, a long-term friendship? Typically, if you're going to maintain something for convenience, or maintain something where like every time you travel to that country, basically, like I said, it's every time you travel to that country, so you're going to have to go back to that country very often to actually maintain anything like that. Um, if you're going to accelerate shit, you're basically going to get. You're not going to always get the best, but you're going to get like some of the you're going to have a better pickings based on the fact that you're from America versus if you're from another country or the same country. So it's one of those things where like you basically are able to you'll have options based on the fact that you're from America, more than you would from other countries. Because typically America is a shit in other people's eyes for all intents and purposes. So it's one of those things where it's like your options change based on your intent, like I said at the beginning of this video. It all depends on why you're there or what you're doing. Are you staying? Do you have a place there? Are you invested in a place? Do you know the language of the place? So the more the language you can speak, the better opportunities you have. The more you're invested in a place, you actually have a place there, the more your opportunities actually go up too. Unless you go to like Pattaya, but unless you go to like Thailand or places like that, then your options are pretty high no matter what, for all intents purposes. Um, Costa Rica is a very good place for you to definitely check out. They typically, I would say, for you, since you don't speak a lot of Spanish, I would say stick to San Jose. San Jose should be good for you. Um, yeah, that should be good for you to actually travel to if you're going to go to Costa Rica. Typically, stay there. If you're going to go outside San Jose, I would say definitely check out the Lemon district for all intents and purposes, or Lemon. I would say check out Lemon. You typically run into a lot more people that can speak a lot more English, or they speak a patois or a meleku, or it's not meleku. Make me tell you. That's typically a spinoff of Jamaican patois. So a lot of them actually speak that. A lot of even the Spanish speaking ones speak that. Even Jamaicans actually speak Spanish as well too. So they speak English, and their base language is typically make me tell you. Um, so you should be fine in like Lemon or San Jose because it's a touristy destination for all intents and purposes. So you should be fine there. I would say Jocko. I would say go to Jocko if you're more adventurous, but typically in Jocko you're going to want to learn more Spanish. You have better opportunities in Jocko. Jaco or Jocko. I mean, damn. Yeah. Um, actually don't know the percentage to that. You're probably gonna have to put in some work. So chances of you being approached are pretty much slim to none unless you go to Central America or Netherlands. are any Scandinavian countries and or Russia and or the Netherlands for all intents and purposes, or the Central America, you're more likely to be approached in those countries than anywhere else for all intents and purposes, in Russia and Belarus and places like that. So yeah, no. You actually got to put in some effort. Um, you're not always going to get the same. You're not always going to get the same treatment unless people know that you're from America. Then typically, if they know you're from America, you might get some more treatment. You might get some special treatment based on that. But typically, there's really no statistics or percentages for you being approached as a man for all intents and purposes. I would say if you're going to pay for Tinder and get the Tinder passport, do it and just swipe. If you're just going to get regular Tinder, you can get regular Tinder and travel all over the world and basically use your and use your thing to basically do it. Use your location, because typically how Tinder works is it'll pretty much switch based on your location. So you technically really don't need Tinder passport for that, and you really don't need to invest that much money into Tinder if you're going to travel abroad for all intents and purposes. That's if you travel abroad. So if you're going to get Tinder, you really don't need to go with passport. All you really need is the base Tinder, and you basically just go from there. And you basically just swipe based on who's close by or not for all intents and purposes. So yeah, no, you really don't need Tinder passport for that. But if you really want it, you can get it. But you really don't need it for that reason. Because typically when you touch down, the Tinder app basically goes based on your location. So you never really need it for that reason. And typically a good example of that is my one master teacher who I was telling you about. He has a Tinder app on his thing. So typically he opens it up whenever he lands in that country and starts swiping. However long he's going to be in that country, he starts swiping basically. So it basically helps you via location on Tinder for all intents purposes. So basically, you'll basically, when you travel to another country, you'll basically enter that market as soon as you land or get to that country, and you open up the Tinder app. So you never really have to get the passport. Um, you never really have to pay for it for that reason, for the fact that if you just travel, you'll be fine. If you travel a lot or you travel decently, you never have to worry about getting that. But yeah, I would definitely have the Tinder app when you travel to those countries. That's pretty much self-explanatory. You're more likely to get fucked with if you're black or white in certain European countries. Like a good example, one is Greece. You're more likely to get fucked with if you're black or white in Greece. If we want to go racist, um, if we're going to go racism, typically Asians pretty much skate through there quite nicely. They typically don't get bothered, and they typically, countries like that where black or whites get fucked with the most, they typically Asians typically skate through there quite easily for all intents purposes. That's the upside to actually being Asian and traveling for those reasons, because typically you'll run into a pocket of people who hate you just because. And right now, the flavor of hate right now is white. So, typically when you go to Australia, or if you're going to the funny thing I found out about Australia and UK and places where they got like heavy feminism, Spain and a lot of these other European countries, something I've noticed is if you're a white guy from another country, you typically make it into those countries very easy. Let it be Australia, let it be, UK, let it be Spain, let it be anything like that for all intents purposes. You typically get to walk through those countries very easily. Another good example of a feminist, heavily feminist country is Canada. If you're American, you typically make it through there quite easily. You typically don't really have to face as much of a backlash as an actual Canadian or a person who actually live in those countries. Asians tend to escape that very easily. So you very rarely have to worry if you're an Asian in a lot of these countries. The sad part about that is a lot of these countries are more open than America. We think America's open about sex, but America's pretty conservative about sex. A good example of that is the movie Cuties, which like I said, when it comes to certain markets, certain things won't fly in certain markets that as they would in other markets. Typically, European market are pretty much open to shit like this, whereas the American market isn't okay with shit like this. Typically, the European market is pretty much open when it comes to sexuality and shit like that, whereas America, they typically are very conservative when it comes to sex. So, to be honest with you, all other countries are more open about sex than America is. End of story. Um, yeah, Americans very conservative when it comes to sex or sexuality for all intents and purposes. So that's pretty much a moot point when it comes to that. You shouldn't even have any problems in other countries. If they approach you in California, you're fine. You asked this one in the last call. You asked this one in the last You asked this one in the last thing. You won't have any problems. You'll be fine. Yeah, like Baron Yam said here, basically being a resolve and parting are basically primary skills you need to for traveling if you're going to be an open person. Spontaneity and charisma also are good too. So you'll be fine. It depends on where you are in that country. It depends on where you really are in that country. Um, some countries people don't take showers. Some countries they do. Some countries they don't brush their teeth. Some countries they do. It all depends on the people and who they are. Like they always say, they say British people don't brush their teeth, but there's a lot of British people that actually brush their teeth. They'll say a lot of Europeans don't take showers or brush their teeth, but there are a lot of European people who actually take showers and brush their teeth. It all depends on where you're from, for all intents and purposes. No, because typically, why would you show up? Why would you show up in a country and try to match with women before you get to that country? Typically, what you're going to do is basically, I mean, you can if you want to and you want to pay for that, but you really don't have to pay for Tinder Passport to do that. I mean, you can do that if you want to, but the question is, when are you actually going to be in that country? You typically don't want to. You typically don't want an app. You typically don't want to use an app if you're not going to go to that country anytime soon. Is basically the concept behind it. If you're going to be in that country for a decent amount of time, use the app. If you're going to be in that country the day before, then yes, get the app. If you're not going to be in that country, you're just going to swipe on people. It's totally pointless to actually do for all intents and purposes. Now, you can get lucky and do that in those countries. I mean, it does happen. Blind squirrel does find a nut if you're never going to make it to the countries anytime soon. But typically, a lot of these women want to know when you're actually going to be in this country and how soon you're going to be in this country. That's pretty much how that works. Hmm. Corey still said. Corey still said again. Yeah, with the whole entire feminist thing. The sad part about that is women are more sexually open in a lot of these other countries than they are in America. It is what it is. A lot of these countries are more open than college co-eds. Let's just put it that way. So you have a better chance. You have a better chance of actually getting sex from women in these countries than you do from a college co-ed. That's the best way I can describe it to you. So yeah, if you know anything about college co-eds and how often they actually sleep around, you pretty much know that it's easier to actually get sex in these other countries. Um, on that note, I'm going to end this last stream because a lot of the same questions are being asked. and it's starting to be redundant. And basically, a lot of the questions I've already answered in the first one, the first Q&A one, and all the other ones that went with it for all intents and purposes. So if you have any questions about this, basically go back and watch any of those videos from this series for all intents and purposes. I pretty much covered everything, and as far as questions are concerned, people are pretty much running out of questions and are asking the same questions over again. Um, it depends. It really depends. It really depends as far as like feminists are concerned. Like I said, if you're from another country, you'll typically have an easier time with feminists in Australia. If you're from America, you'll have an easier time with feminists from other countries, basically. Because the sad part about that, even though they talk shit, their hypergamy is very high as far as America is concerned, especially Australia, especially New Zealand, especially when it comes to Great Britain, all these other European countries, Canada, shit like that. No matter how feminist they are in their countries, they typically tend to be more open when it comes to men from other countries. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to be disrespectful or say anything outlandish, basically. I'll just leave it at that. So it's one of those things where it's like when you run into that, you basically have to understand what you're getting yourself into, and you basically have to know why you're going to these countries. If you're going for just to have a little bit of fun, it's going to be a different group of girls or a different caliber of girls that you're going to get when you enter those countries than it would be if you were going there to make connections for all intents and purposes, or if you know the language of that country. You'll typically have a better opportunity of meeting better women for all intents and purposes, is the best way I can describe it to you. Same thing goes for, other things along the lines of that too. If you have a place of residence or you're more invested in that country, both either, verbally, like by learning the language, and or you have a physical address there or a phone number from that country, you typically have a better chance of actually meeting or opening up more options for you in that country for all intents and purposes when it comes down to it. But that's enough for today. Y'all be blessed. Have a good one. Be good to yourselves. Treat yourselves like milk and number. Spoil yourselves. And always get your passport game on. And always travel and get to learn the world. And you'll have a better perception of the world in your own country if you travel around the world for all intents and purposes. Because typically a lot of people have this negative connotation on other countries, but they never actually been to those countries. Or they have this negative connotation about countries because they're very narrow-minded and they close-minded. Like, I worked with a woman who her and her husband went to Costa Rica, and I pretty much know why they had the worst time in Costa Rica based on her own personality. So the sad part about that is if you're going to be like a narrow-minded American, like I said, you're going to run into a lot of shit. A lot of negative shit's going to happen to you. You're going to run into a lot of shit in these countries if you're narrow-minded from your country. You typically have to have an open mind. You have to be an open person to be able to get around these countries and have fun in these countries and be able to party in these countries and have as much fun as you humanly possibly can in all of these countries. Like Baron Yam said right here. Resolve and partying are primary skills for traveling. If you don't have the resolve and you're not open-minded and you can't have fun partying and be open to partying and doing various things and trying new things, you're typically going to run into a lot more problems. Along with spontaneity, you got to have a lot of spontaneity, and you got to have a decent amount of charisma also to go with it. So if you're not willing to do that, don't travel. Don't travel in the least bit. Just have an open mind and love to have fun and do it to the best of your ability. You may not make it, but somebody will notice it and they'll try to loosen you up a little bit more and they'll have fun with you and they'll make your experience a lot more fun for all intents and purposes. So don't be a stick in the mud when you travel to these countries. Don't have a stick in your ass when you travel to these countries, basically. Be very open to traveling. You can't be a tight ass in these countries. Your ass be tight enough to make a fucking diamond out of shit that gets squeezed between your ass. Be open. Be loose. Be willing to have fun. Just be willing to go with it and go with the flow and have fun. Try new things. Don't go too crazy with it. Just be willing to try new things for all intents and purposes. You're welcome. Peace, Corey Steele. What's up, Janky Show? You're very open-minded and you love to have fun. You shouldn't have any problems. Some countries you do need to have some money to have fun, and some you can get away with it based on how the dollar actually trades off with the actual money in their country. So typically you can actually get away with, having fun on the cheap, depending on the country you go to. Typically a lot of the European countries, you're going to spend a bit more money, or it's going to be a tad bit more expensive when you travel to these countries. But for all the third world countries like your Central Americas and and a lot of your Asian countries like that, you'll be perfectly fine. You'll be perfectly fine spending money. You don't got to actually be a baller. Um, it depends on your it depends on you. Typically I could land in a country and make friends in a day if I really wanted to. I'd never really have any problems with doing that. I would say typically stay anywhere between on minimum. I would say stay 3 days minimum. Minimum 3 days. If you're going to travel to another country, stay a minimum of 3 days. Um, if you want to actually have fun or shake out, get a feel for the country and be able to shake out some stuff basically and get used to the country. Stay for 3 days, minimum, minimum. Um, yeah, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Y'all have a good one. Be blessed and try to take care of yourselves and we always keep an open mind for traveling and always be willing to travel. Um, but y'all be blessed, be good to yourselves, and have fun and travel the world. Definitely, see, definitely travel the world, get new experiences, and always be willing to always be open to new things for all intents and purposes. And like I said, if you learn the language, that opens the door for you a lot more if you don't speak the language. So you're able to have an opportunity of getting and reaching more people based on the fact that you speak their language or you somewhat know their language for all intents and purposes. But be blessed and be good. Good night, everybody. Adios.